Family Justice Center to celebrate the signing of two critical bills to support our city's victims of survivors of domestic and gender-based violence. I often talk about my growing up with my single mother. She's 92 years old right now. But what I don't often talk about was that she was a victim of domestic violence before when I was 6 with my 3 older brothers when we grew up in Queens. It was places like this that we needed. If it hadn't been for the fact that she had a job, so she didn't have to lose her job, she was able to keep our home, she was able to keep us in schools. Thank God for the nuns at St. Catherine's of Siena School and all of our neighbors that came over and supported our family. So this topic is so important to so many families in this city. I want to thank the City Council, and especially the sponsor of this bill, Councilmember Caban, for her hard work on this bill and commitment to supporting survivors in our city. Where's Councilwoman Caban? Thank you. Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge the incredible work of my colleague, Commissioner Noel, in this realm. Without her, a revolutionary space like this, the Manhattan Family Justice Center, wouldn't be possible. Now I want to take a moment and recognize all of the advocates in the room. We are so grateful for your partnerships in fighting this community and providing essential services that help survivors heal. Danny Salim, Deputy Director of Solution-Based Casework, Arab American Family Support Center. Carmen Acosta, Director of Children's Services, Help Roads. Michael Polenberg, Vice President, Government Affairs, Safe Horizon. Jennifer Friedman, Director, Bronx and Manhattan Legal Project Policy Sanctuary for Families. Lisa Mueller, Director of Development and Communications, Sanctuary for Families. Nathaniel Fields, Chief Executive Officer, Urban Resource Institute, and Carmen Beltry, Manager, Violence Intervention Program, Inc., VIP. I'd also like to acknowledge Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, who is a critical partner in the work of keeping survivors safe and holding their abusers accountable. The two bills that Mayor Adams will sign shortly show our city's commitment to giving victims and survivors of gender-based violence the tools they need to find safety, stability, and healing. Domestic violence is a driver of homelessness in this city, we know, for many families. The Housing Stability Grant that we will sign into law today will keep a key support for us to keep survivors safe and stable in their homes, which is so important for them and their children. Now I want to introduce and thank our next speaker, Mayor Eric Adams, who cares deeply about this issue and has made supporting our victims of domestic and gender-based violence a priority in his administration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. I'm really excited about these bills and want to thank the Councilwoman Caban for bringing this forward, and really want to thank the Speaker and looking at really these important issues that have been ignored for such a long period of time. And just as the Deputy Mayor, I think many, far too many, can tell the narratives and the stories of domestic violence. And growing up as children, we did not have resources like this. It was just a commonality. Even in the early days of policing, responding officers would just merely tell the abuser to just go for a walk, only for them to come back and continue to abuse. And when you look at this, we realize that everyone deserves a safe space, a safe place. And as we walked through the area earlier, you saw that it was a safe space. Far too many New Yorkers no longer feel safe in their home. They believe instead is a place that has too many memories of being abused, and the options are narrow, particularly when you deal with the economics involved, and if you have children, the consequences on leaving a home without any financial support makes it extremely difficult. Domestic and gender-based violence can happen anywhere in our city, and it can happen to anyone. We have a sacred duty to protect survivors of domestic and gender-based violence, and this is something that we believe strongly on in this administration and in this city council. We believe that it is exactly the type of bills we're signing today that is going to continue to bring about that support. Intro 153-A establishes a housing stability program for survivors of domestic and gender-based violence. And Intro 154-A requires the Office of Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence to create an online services portal and guide. Domestic and gender-based violence is a public safety issue. Far too often it shows violence. Many of the assaults and homicides, unfortunately, stem from domestic and gender-based violence. In 2021 alone, there were 260,000 domestic violence incidents reports filed by the NYPD. And you think about it, it's an average of 700 a day, over 700 a day. And to those who suffer domestic and gender-based violence, I want them to know that as a city, we're here. We're not going to have a blind eye or deaf ear to what you're going through. And so I want to thank, the councilwoman, the bill's sponsor and chair of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity. This is something that she strongly believes in fighting for, and we're happy to be here to sign these bills. And Speaker Adrian Adams and our Commissioner Cecile Noel, who works tirelessly to make New York City a safe haven for survivors. And all the advocates, as was mentioned by the Deputy Mayor, coming together and help carve out and shape out these bills so we can get the results we're looking for. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to bring forth our Speaker, Adrian Adams, a sister from Southeast Queens, someone that many of us in government look to as a role model and a person who has been committed to this issue of domestic and gender-based violence for her whole life. Speaker Adams.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Mayor Eric Adams and Deputy Mayor Williams Isom, for hosting us today for this wonderful ceremony to officially sign the Support Survivors legislative package into law. I also want to thank my colleague and the lead sponsor of the bills, Councilmember Tiffany Caban, for her leadership and advocacy on this important issue. I want to acknowledge and thank all of the survivors whose experiences and voices inform and drive this work forward. Domestic and gender-based violence has always been a major issue in our city and in our nation. As we know, it has only been exacerbated by the impacts of the pandemic. Last year, our city recorded more than 89,000 domestic violence complaints, the highest number reported in recent years. Nationally, 1 in 4 women and nearly 1 in 10 men have experienced sexual or physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. These statistics do not include incidents that go unreported due to the stigma, fear, and shame caused by this violence. For many years, the Council has prioritized the health and well-being of survivors of domestic and gender-based violence by providing resources through our funding initiatives and support of community partners. Ensuring survivors of violence can access recovery is essential to public safety, and it must be a priority. This council in particular has been focused on expanding support for crime victims who are often underserved and do not receive the support and recovery they need. All too frequently, crime victims are referenced in policy debates on public safety, yet not enough is done to actually provide survivors of violence with access to the services they need. That is why we created a new Speaker's Initiative for Community Safety and Victim Services, providing $100,000 to each council member to allocate for safety programs and victim services in their districts. The council has also championed the establishment of New York State's first trauma recovery centers in New York City to provide services to crime victims who often fall through the cracks of traditional services. We're progressing in our process to establish these trauma recovery centers to serve communities in our city that experience the most violence. As we continue this work of supporting survivors, it's important to uplift and amplify the voices of those most impacted, because the solutions to our city's challenges reside in them. When considering legislation to improve how our city supports survivors, we listened to them, and we listened and heard about what they need to access safety and stability. Introduction 553A establishes a new program to provide survivors with low-barrier grants that help with maintaining housing, because we know housing support is a major challenge that victims of domestic and gender-based violence face. And Introduction 154A consolidates available resources into one place that is accessible so survivors who are seeking help can easily find the services they need. In the aftermath of violence, the trauma that people experience can present challenges to recovery, and it is critical that services are made easier to access. These new laws will help improve lives and make a tangible difference for New Yorkers who have suffered so much trauma already. It will help them heal and recover from the violence they have experienced and access safety. I'm proud of the work of this council. I'm proud of the work that we've accomplished to address long-standing challenges facing our city. We have prioritized solutions that protect and support communities, and we will continue to focus on advancing efforts that improve public safety and the lives of all New Yorkers. I give special thanks to my longtime friend, Commissioner Cecile Noel, for her long-standing dedication to this cause. Thank you again to Councilmember Caban for her leadership on this legislation. Thank you again, Mayor Adams, for signing these bills into law. And thank you, all of the survivors and advocates who helped advance these laws. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And those key words, safety, stability, and healing. Now I'd like to introduce the sponsor of this legislation, Councilwoman Tiffany Caban. I'm so happy to stand with you today for the signing of these bills. Thank you for your tireless advocacy for this community, and I look forward to working with you as we stand up these programs.
Good morning. Again, a really proud and exciting and a moment filled with gratitude. I think, like all of the people standing behind me, these are issues that are deeply personal. As somebody who has been impacted and comes from a family impacted generationally by intimate partner violence, as someone who started my legal career doing VAWAs and U visas for undocumented survivors, someone who represented clients in integrated domestic violence court, right, on their family and criminal court matters, as a public defender who represented criminalized survivors day after day, year after year. It is an honor and a privilege to continue centering that work as a legislator in this city. And so I'm grateful, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for inviting me to say a few words about these two groundbreaking bills. When I first became chair of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity, thank you, Speaker, I shared that my focus this term would be on shifting resources and power away from patriarchal systems of violence and punishment and toward the compassionate, life-giving systems that we've sidelined and devalued for a really long time. And I'm really proud to be delivering on that promise with the two bills that our mayor is signing today. Now, earlier this year, the council heard testimony from courageous survivors of domestic and gender-based violence who told us their personal stories and identified very clearly the institutional and policy-based factors that contributed to their lack of access to the services that we owe them. And while there are many great resources in this city, there are few that trust survivors of violence to know exactly what they need and equip them with the funds to make decisions in their best interest. And it's what we should have always done, and it's exactly what these bills do. They remove barriers survivors laid out and proactively establish the programs and resources that survivors said that they needed. And as a former public defender, like I said before, I've seen how time and time again, bless you, our governments and court systems have cynically used violence and trauma experienced by survivors as merely a pretext to ramp up policing, prosecution, and incarceration, leaving survivors without access to the actual services and protections that they say that they need to heal, to be safe, and to thrive, and so no longer. Make no mistake, these bills will save lives. The online portal and written resource guide available in all major languages and in Braille will make it much more likely that survivors will know about and take advantage of the great life-saving programs that are already available. And the low-barrier, urgently accessible grant program will directly address one of the most significant barriers that survivors face in leaving dangerous situations, and that's economic precarity. This first, as far as I know, first in the nation, piece of legislation put forth by a city, this grant program, this low-barrier, life-saving program, and urgently accessible grant program will directly address one of the most significant barriers survivors face in leaving dangerous situations, like I mentioned. It can be used to offer survivors funding for housing, medical, counseling, legal, and other immediate expenses and services, which could range from moving costs to mobile phone costs to costs associated with developing a safety plan and more. But all of this only happens if the program is fully funded. And the microgrants program that NGB stood up at the start of the pandemic, which incredible job. I mean, they did really, really incredible work, really fast, and have laid really the framework and groundwork for this, that they stood up at the start of the pandemic, distributed almost $500,000 to 377 unique survivors in just 2 months. And so by that math, for 1 year of effective programming, we should put minimum $3 million into this fund. And I want to thank all of the advocates, the mayor and his team, the Mayor's Office to End Domestic Violence and Gender-Based Violence, the Council's legislative staff, my legislative director, Madhuri, who's here with us today, without whom all of these bills wouldn't be possible. And I look forward to working with all of you to fully fund and implement these laws, and I can't wait to celebrate many survivor success stories together. So thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Councilmember Caban. I think it's time for us to sign the bill.
Yep. See if there are any questions on this before I sign. They come back more time.
Okay.
Any questions on these bills? No, if they have questions on these, then I'm gonna sign and I'll do off top.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Councilwoman Caban just mentioned the proposed funding for this program. She mentioned the dollar figure, $3 million. Are you ready to commit to a figure like that to fully fund the program?
Well, anytime the council and the mayor's office, we sit down and we use the budgetary process to determine how we allocate funding. We have a great partnership with them on items like these that we agree on, and so we're going to identify the dollars to make it happen.
Does it sound like the right figure to you, though? Just off the bat?
It's not up to me. I got a budget director, the speaker. She has her budget team. They're going to sit down and hash that out.
Yeah, I have questions from victims of domestic violence about issues around accessing services. And one was about being eligible. I spoke to a victim of domestic violence who has 3 children, is working, but is not eligible for food stamps because of her gross income. So she's asking if the city can be more flexible about the eligibility requirements to help victims, cover their expenses. That's one. And the second one is about ACS. In my African immigrant community, ACS is not Administration for Children's Services, and we cannot talk about domestic violence without talking about ACS. But there is no trust, and they see ACS as the agency taking African children away. So how can we rebuild trust so victims who really need help can come to city agencies and the government and get that help?
So listen, you gave me 2 questions, so let me peel them one at a time. First, we would like to look at that case study that you're talking about, that someone was not allowed or did not reach the right threshold to get the assistance they need, because we always need to modify these systems and make sure people are not slipping through the gap. And so if there's a particular case, I would like to see that case, and then our team, Deputy Mayor William Isom and her team, will look at what do we need to do to modify so we don't lose families like that. I don't know the specific case and the fact patterns around it. We have to look at that to better answer that question. ACS, I don't believe there's a more difficult job in making decisions when it comes down to safety of children and families than the job of ACS. Those men and women who are employed there, they are damned if they do remove a child that is in an unsafe environment. People say you are just taking children from black and brown families and immigrant families. Then they're damned if they don't make the right calls. They're on the front pages of our papers. You were aware of this and you left the child inside that household. It's a tough, tough job with the caseloads that they have. I know this. The commissioner over there is committed. The employees are committed. They don't want to break up families, but they don't want to leave a child in an environment that's unsafe. We all know what happens when you do that. On my team is Amma Jamal. She was the creator of the unit in the the King's District Attorney's Office, Crimes Against Children, and she has been forthright on how we can continuously get it better. But we have to be clear. State law mandates every case of abuse to a child must be investigated by ACS. It's a law. And they have to go in, they have to do an investigation, and if there are signs of abuse, they have to take action. It's a tough job to do. You can't get it wrong. If you get it wrong, you could decimate families, and you can also leave a child in an environment that's unsafe. We are trying to get it right all the time, but it is not an easy task to do, but they are committed and they're dedicated. Great.
Great. Behind over there, please.
Today is the 23rd.
22nd.
Just goes all the time.
All right.
You hold your stomach like you're about to deliver.
A few more days.